Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
We turn our attention next to a plan to help people at risk of diabetes avoid it. I think it's National Diabetes Day today. Just bear with me for a moment, will you? Because I mentioned in the last hour that I used to be a bit of a divot with respect to animal rights. And I used to be a massive divot with respect to obesity and overweight people. I used to subscribe very much to the school of thought that says eat less, exercise more. It's not exactly complicated, which is the intellectual equivalent of telling somebody with anorexia just to have a meal and get over themselves. And as soon as you pointed that out to me, I know that that's not going to apply to every overweight person, but demonizing obesity and denigrating overweight people is just nuts, and it's going to have the opposite effect on helping people. Obesity quite often linked to self-esteem issues, and the idea that by making people feel even worse about themselves than they do already is going to somehow make them stop comfort eating or educate themselves about healthier eating is palpably absurd. But it did occur to me, because I even had a hilarious nickname for overweight people that, oh, how we laughed when someone rang. And this isn't a criticism of whoever it was that rang in to tell me that their little boy had employed my my catchy insult while talking in the supermarket queue about the woman who was behind the till. So it does occur to me, it's very hard to do a job like this without picking on people. You do need sometimes to provide a target for us all to throw our fury at. And obviously in recent years, I now pick on bigots and racists on a daily basis, misogynists and homophobes. But I used to pick on some of the easier targets. I did used to pick on fat people, or people who love animals, or people who had tattoos. I used to do some hilarious programs saying I'd never let a person with a tattoo teach my children. And then a nurse rang in, a critical care nurse rang in to ask whether or not I'd let her look after my children if they were ever in a car accident. Because she was covered in tattoos, and I changed my mind on that immediately. I love the freedom that we have as humans to change our minds, and I spend my life despairing at my fellow men and women who refuse that opportunity, refuse to ever accept that invitation that they might have been wrong about things. But once you've accepted that you're wrong about obesity, it doesn't mean you've got better answers to the questions of how you fix it. Just because you now know that eat less, exercise more, get over yourself is a stupid response, as ever. The notion that a complicated question can be solved with a simple answer is I mean, you've got millennia of evidence that that's not true, but it's still very seductive to the human mind. So I've got rid of the idea that it is simply a case of eating less and exercising more. And I accept that personal anecdotal experiences are very rarely going to address the whole issue of obesity, but we are now the fattest country in Western Europe. Period. Part of me wants to know why. And when I say why, I don't mean, oh, it's because we eat more, James. I mean, compared to other countries, I have a little suspicion in the back of my head that we've gone down the American advertising model with rather more enthusiasm than, for example, the French have. But I know there was a point at which the children on Gran Canaria were the fattest children in Western Europe. So it's not always as simple as perhaps you want it to be at first glance. If you have, and goodness knows we're not going to be able to do topics like this in a couple of years' time, but if you have full experience of living in more than one European country, then I'd love you to tell me why you think Britain is the fattest country in Western Europe. That's your starter for 10. Okay, and you will get through on that. Apologies to everyone who was waiting to talk about zoos, but I felt Will Travers from the Born Free Foundation kind of shut down the amateurs like me on that one. So a genuine exercise in illumination and elucidation. But it means that you'll get through now. If you've got a proper handle on that, So, I mean, it could be really simple stuff like the Mediterranean diet. Like when I spent a lot of time in Greece, which I'm hoping to do again in the coming years, but I had a Greek girlfriend many, many moons ago, and her dad was a lovely, lovely man, but he didn't speak any English. And we used to go off to he had a sort of small holding in the hills outside Athens as a hobby. He was a businessman, but he was a gentleman farmer, if you will, and it was where he went to escape from his family, I think, in retrospect, and now having 2 daughters of my own. And we just used to sit there drinking Cretan hooch called raki, which is, crikey, I know that'll take paint off a table. But we used to sit there drinking Cretan hooch and eating sort of pickled artichokes and grapes and stuff that he'd picked. And I'd help him out with the agricultural work. And when he came to England, he used to laugh at our tomatoes. I don't get all patriotic about this. He used to find our tomatoes hilarious because he'd come into an English supermarket, and this holds true in America as well, and he couldn't believe the uniformity of the produce. He genuinely couldn't believe that all our cucumbers were the same shape and the same length, that all our tomatoes were blemish-free and perfect, that all our... Come on, quick, think of another vegetable. All our carrots were... cone-shaped rather than sort of knobbly and ugly. And this isn't... Think about this, because this is my starter for 10, is that we have a really weird attitude to food in England that's probably traceable back to rationing. Certainly rationing would have been the birth of the idea that shop-bought was better than homemade. My mum's explained this to me, why a shop-bought cake would cost more than a homemade cake. So if you got a shop-bought cake, then you were telling the neighbours that that you were quite well off. Of course, at the time, shop-bought meant bought from your local baker who's made it with the perfect ingredients. Shop-bought now means full of palm oil and preservatives and considerably less good or healthy than the one you could have baked yourself. But that ship seems to have sailed. So my friend from Ekali outside Athens would laugh at British produce. And when I started spending time on his small holding, I realised why. Because the tomato that is the size of a small pumpkin with a scab right down one side of it, you just cut off the scab, chop up that tomato, and it tastes like summer. A tomato from a British supermarket tastes a little bit like the packaging that it's wrapped up in. And that perhaps is just a beginning, because I'm in the dark on this as much as you are. But the only countries I can really compare Britain to, because I've spent enough time there, would probably be Greece and France. And they just seem to... Because the French have got this word terroir, T-E... I've probably pronounced it like Hyacinth Bucket, but T-E-R-R-O... IRS, which I think is the nearest we would have to provenance, which is also a French word. And it means there's a real interest in where food comes from. And so I just wonder, when I read that the government or the NHS is going to issue thousands of overweight people with activity tracking wristbands, it's a little tribute to Chris Packham, wristbands and smartphone apps in an effort to persuade them to eat more healthily and exercise more. I just wonder if this is approaching it in the wrong way. Because we eat rubbish. The reason why, that's what you need to do. You need to work out why Britain is the fattest country in Western Europe. And then you get a handle on how you fix it, by making it less different from all the other countries. Or do you go down the route that Simon Stevens, the head of the NHS, is going down, and kind of moving it online, because that's where we spend so much of the rest of our lives? I don't know. But I think I'm going to back knowledge and interest in food more than I'm going to back technology and funny little bracelets somehow encouraging you to go for a jog or to eat less. I don't get the bracelets. Do you get the bracelets? When someone posts on Facebook that they ran 4 miles last Tuesday and you could not care less, but they carry on posting it. And I'm talking about, people I hold dear here as well, so if any of them are listening, it's the only thing about you I find mad. Why would anyone else be interested in the exercise you've done? Or is that the point that I'm missing? So that if you do start tracking it online and you do start building up a kind of app-based history, it encourages you to do more. So if you use these funny little trinkets and gadgets, is that how they work? So the reason why you're telling all your Facebook friends that you ran 4 miles last Tuesday is because that encourages you to run 5 miles next Tuesday. I'll take the psychology of the technology. Ooh, sounds like a Kraftwerk album. 0345 6060 973. The psychology of the technology, but also why Britain is now the fattest country in Western Europe. And that, I think, is a conversation about comparisons with other countries. So wherever you're from, or maybe you live with someone who's from another country and it's changed your attitude to food. Yeah, should we do it this way round, actually, rather than just doing the hackneyed old, how did you lose weight? Let's do it this way round. When you look, knowing as you do, enough about 2 or more countries, and you compare our eating habits, why is Britain the fattest country in Western Europe? I've given you 2 possible answers to that, but you can expand on either of them or bring in an answer of your own. Theory number 1, because we follow America, and America industrialised food consumption on an epic scale decades ago, and we've just followed them down the road of tipping as much sugar down our necks as we humanly can, even feeding it to cows. And I give you provenance or terroir, or the origin of food, the fact that we don't have much interest yet in this country. And when we do have an interest, it's actually sort of dismissed, isn't it? As most good things in Britain are dismissed at the moment, as being evidence of metropolitan elites. Or so. I spend a lot of time in Norfolk. I can tell you now that the interest in food that you find around there, and I don't just mean going to farmers markets and stuff like that, I mean going to pubs, is huge. And yet it's a very rarefied corner of the country now, that Norfolk coastline. You go elsewhere in the country and there isn't an interest in food. Where did it come from? It doesn't have to be more expensive. You can grow it yourself. But we've somehow, this was last year's big breakthrough, wasn't it? The 2 things that have somehow been maligned as middle class are cooking and reading. The fetishisation of ignorance that's been an inevitable upshot and probably a necessary precursor for the Brexit vote. But the effort that these right-wing newspapers have put into demonising education, demonising expertise, also, I would argue, are responsible for this notion that reading and eating well are middle-class obsessions. Remember, commentators queuing up to attack Jamie Oliver for helping people who didn't know any better to stop making their children fat. Oh, who does he think he is, the do-gooder? It's quite an odd country, isn't it, when you think of it like that? Look, here's someone who knows more about food than you do, and he's going to help you make your children healthy. Oh, get back in your box, Oliver, you Ramona. I have no idea where he stands on that particular issue, but I think the rhetoric is comparable. And that will be part of the reason why Britain is the fattest country in Western Europe, because it's fast becoming the stupidest. 0345 6060 973 if you'd like to join me in a patriotic fight against the stupid. I haven't come up with a very good question on the technology issue. The head of the NHS wants to issue thousands of overweight people with activity tracking wristbands and smartphone apps. I've got a mental block on wristbands now. I don't know enough about this world to know whether it works or not. So that's my question. Do they work? You know, when your mates on Facebook tell you they've run 4 miles, just give me a call and let me know whether they work. But the question I'm really interested in is why we are fatter. We have a fatter population than any other Western European country, when you'd think we'd have, you know, a lot in common. Well, why? What do you know about, what comparison can you make with other Western countries in answer to the question of, Western European countries, in answer to the question of why we're the fattest? 21 minutes after 12. Zoe is in Belfast. Zoe, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Zoe.
I didn't really think about the question until you had asked it there, and I kind of sat and thought and asked myself, why are we getting bigger? And I think it's a lot to do with tolerance and acceptance. So, you know, if the Big is Beautiful campaign, you know, things like that, you know, love yourself as you are, you know, I think that has fed into people's thinking about food and how their body image is. And I speak as an overweight person myself.
And are you untroubled by your weight?
I am troubled, and I'm sick of listening to myself, telling myself all the time that I'm going to lose weight.
So I don't know. I mean, ordinarily, this is one of the rare places in the British media where tolerance and acceptability are cherished and championed and valued. So I'm a little uncomfortable with the idea that this problem is caused by tolerance. Do you see what I mean?
Yes, but you see where I'm coming from.
I do, yeah, I do.
If you think, oh, well, I don't need to do anything about myself because I should love myself and people should look at me and love me too.
As a man, these campaigns don't touch me as much as I think they touch women. And I had understood them to be not so much that being obese is something you should celebrate and be proud of, but not being a stick-thin supermodel is something you should celebrate and be proud of. Do you see the difference? I've always looked at these campaigns and just seen ordinary women who haven't been photoshopped or had their image manipulated or lived on cabbage water for the last 3 weeks or spent, 5 times the national average income on makeup, grooming and hair care. I never really saw it as campaigns. I never saw them as campaigns to make unhealthy levels of obesity acceptable.
Yes.
But you did.
No, I just feel that if you get comfortable in yourself in being overweight, then it's very hard to motivate yourself to lose weight. And, it's creeping, it's kind of insidious because it's creeping into other areas of your life. For example, if you get sick and you have to go to hospital, there's reinforced beds now. They've
got reinforced morgues. They've got reinforced drawers in mortuaries in some hospitals. Yeah. Do you think...
The world is adapting to, for obesity.
And that's why Simon Stevens is issuing thousands of overweight people with activity tracking wristbands and smartphone apps, because the cost to the NHS, everything from blindness to amputations, can be caused by diabetes. Obviously, cost the NHS billions of pounds a year. Would you sign up for one of these wristbands yourself?
I probably would. I would think about it, but in reality, I think there's a change in your own mind that needs to come. You need to have an individual, personal, reason for losing that weight. And I think somebody come along and saying, we've got this big program, come and join us. That's one thing, but it needs to be a personal thing. The government can only do so much, and they talk about the nanny state and that we're always being told what to do. But I think it really does start with the person. You need to find your own reason. It
doesn't it? Yeah, it's a quality call, Zoe. I'm very grateful to you for kicking things off. I had one of those little light bulb moments a couple of years ago when somebody pointed out to me the amount of money that's spent on encouraging us to pour rubbish down our necks. The sheer weight of propaganda, I would call it, or advertising, as some prefer, telling us to eat KFC, have a Big Mac, drink this, drink that, eat this, eat that. And the size of the bags. First time I went to America, I was looking for a normal lunchbox size packet of crisps. Couldn't find one anywhere. And we've gone down that road now. Everything's like something out of the sack race. So that's why I worry slightly about putting too much weight on personal responsibility, because if you've got 99 voices screaming at you to eat something and one quiet voice telling you not to, how free is your choice?
Well, that's it. It's as simple as going through the drive-thru and asking, did you want to make that large? You don't even have to make a decision. It's just okay.
Yeah, it is another opportunity to shovel more food down your gullet. But again, how does that play in other Western European countries? Zoe, thank you. We're taking a lot of calls from Northern Ireland. I shall, no doubt, secure an enormous audience there just before they leave the United Kingdom and reunify with the Republic. 25 minutes after 12 is the time. Mitchell is in Barnet. Mitchell, what's going on?
Hello, mate. I'm a health coach based in Barnet, and I've noticed over the last few years that a lot of my clients are actually sending their kids to me to get nutritional advice and start exercising and improve their habitual lifestyle.
Give me the British angle. Why would British kids be more in need of your expertise than any other Western European population?
There's so many factors involved, but we're a bit strapped for time. We could talk about this all day, but I believe it's a generational thing. Our parents, unfortunately, they grew up in a time where we started to get our influences from America, and there's a lot more fast food restaurants that were coming from
more than in other European countries. More than in other, because you see the big. Actually, do you know we had a taxi driver in Greece this summer who told us that only tourists go to McDonald's.
Yeah, well, no, it's a good point. And I've spent a lot of time over in America recently and come back to Amsterdam, and they've got things in place there where anyone that's been to Amsterdam will know, where it's just so easy to get on a bike and cycle everywhere, and they're encouraged to do so socially, and it's just the norm. Whereas over here, everything's so close together, but yet we still jump in our cars to get from A to B.
Do you know, the other contender for this hour of conversation was a story about 3/4 of people who live in cities wanting more money for protected bike lanes. It's a perfect example of one of those conversations that's dominated by the very, very loud minority, isn't it? A majority of city dwellers would support their taxes being spent on building cycle lanes, but if I opened up the phone lines now, I could carpet from here to next Tuesday with people absolutely convinced that it's the end of civilization as we know it.
Absolutely. Boris Johnson tried to influence the bike lanes, and he was using Amsterdam as a reference. But I think, you know, there's a lot more people cycling, but I don't think the wristbands is a resolution to the problem.
Do you not? Because I'm just going to read you what a couple of my texters have said, tweeters have said, who used them. One sounded very informed. Fitness trackers. This is Sam, who I think might be in the same line of work as you. I'm not sure. No, he's not. But anyway, he says fitness trackers build a positive reinforcement cycle. Tracking and sharing exercise does encourage you to keep doing it. It doesn't always work, but it's great for some, especially when it leads to dramatic weight loss. It's like someone's keeping track of your progress, and it's you, albeit through the technology. I can see the appeal of that.
Yeah, it's like your previous caller said, though, and I agree with it. It has to come from within you. You have to have motivation to do it yourself, but then that tool then becomes, and it is just a tool, though. It's one of many facets you can use to reach your goals, but it's not the solution, but it does help the problem.
Yeah, and that chicken and egg question, of course, is one that is as old as time. You know, what comes first, the desire to make a change or the ability to make a change? Mitchell, thank you. 29 minutes after 12. 03456060973 is the number you need if you want to grab the phone line that Mitchell has vacated. That's the only one clear at the moment. But I want more on, as well as the insights, I want more on the comparisons. Because, I mean, you know, I completely understand why we've got the slowest growing economy in the European Union now. Overtaken by Greece recently, high fives all round. But I don't understand why we'd be fatter. I suppose one benefit of Brexit will be that we will have to lose weight because food's going to be so expensive, isn't it? Especially if we come out under World Trade Organization rules, 37% on meat. We'll all be living on vegetables. The weight will drop off in a heartbeat. The NHS will be saved. And we'll all live happily ever after. It's coming up to 12:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question is, why is Britain the fattest country in Western Europe? I'm wondering, A, how activity tracking wristbands and smartphone apps work, whether or not technology has helped you lose weight. Genuine question. And why Britain is now the fattest country in Western Europe. Rather easier to have a tilt at that, but there'll be almost as many answers as there are people listening. Alex Sibley, former star of Big Brother, has a theory. He says, it's the air we breathe, James. My wife is French. When we go to France, they all eat cheese, bread and red wine. My mum is German, and all they eat is sausages, bread and beer. They're old, so it must be something to do with the English air. Why, in general, the English are all fat. See, it's insights like that have been missing from British television screens for far too long, Alex. Don is in Redbridge. Don, what would you like to say?
Hi, James.
Hello, Don.
And this is a multifaceted problem. Now, my wife and I have both lived in the US, and we make a habit of spending a lot of time in Europe.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, the first point is, giving people monitors is not going to work. It's rubbish. I work for the NHS. I can tell you why. Because it's a simple thing. Yes, it is true that it's about diet and exercise. The problem is, the average person here is eating a lot more of poorer quality food.
Why?
There's a lot more processed food is cheap, and you have a choice. You can either eat X quantity of processed food, which is cheap and save a lot of money, or you can fall into the temptation when you save money because you get something that's cheap and buy more of it, which is what people tend to do.
But why more here than elsewhere? Because of availability? Because none of us really do.
It's the American thing. It's about lots of stuff being on TV.
And is that not the case in other European countries? Because weirdly, you only ever go there on holiday, so you don't do a weekly shop. You don't live, and you eat out a lot because you're on holiday. So you're not comparing like with like. That's what I lack. I lack that comparison.
I am.
No. I know you are, but I'm not. That's why I'm asking you, Don.
Yeah. Well, when we go, we spend weeks at a time. And so we do the weekly shop, and you realize people buy what's in season. People go to markets. The emphasis is on fresh food made at home. If you combine a situation where people think they have less time here, they see all this advertising for cheap processed food. Some people are lazy.
And that doesn't happen in other European countries. It just doesn't. It's just not happening on anything like the same scale. Because I don't even understand the television, do I? So I can't tell what, you know.
No, it doesn't happen on the same scale. You go to even big towns. People are still trying to find markets to get fresh food.
Yeah.
People are still even when you go to a restaurant, the restaurants tend to cook more fresh food with sensible quantities.
Yeah, I can buy that. I, with my limited sort of perspective, I can buy that. Do we know why? Are we just going to keep saying America because we copy America? Because I suppose the language is part of the problem, isn't it? If you've got a campaign in America that's worked, you can just transport it into England, into Britain straight away in a way that you couldn't to other countries.
Well, James, it's simple economics. These people have billions to advertise. You spend a lot of money advertising. You put it in front of somebody's face 10 times a day. It's going to be a lot more effective than the one visit to a hospital where somebody says, look, put this monitor on and pay attention to your fitness.
Do you remember Sunny Delight, Don? Do you remember Sunny Delight?
Yes.
I mean, that was like nuclear. That would glow in the dark, that stuff. And it didn't even go in the fridge cabinet because it was so full of preservatives. But by the time the advertising campaign had finished, every kid in the country would much rather have Sunny Delight than a glass of proper orange or apple juice or water.
But your parents need to take more responsibility. The fact of it is, it's easier to say it's not my responsibility. It's somebody else's fault that I've gained weight. The bottom line is, even for me, I've spent 20 years as a healthcare professional.
Yes.
It's about how much you put in versus how much you burn. The psychology of people who are overweight means that even if you tell them, eat less, burn more,
yes,
it's a big mental step. So you can't just give them a monitor and expect it to work.
No.
It's impossible.
Well, they need to see. The advantage of the monitor is that you will see improvement. You can track it. You can see it. Are you sure? Some people are telling me it does. Everybody's different.
It works. It works for somebody who is already committed to having a healthy lifestyle and is already doing.
Someone's already over the hump. Somebody who's already made the turn. I hear you, Don. I'm going to move on because it's surprisingly busy, the switchboard. Well, I say surprisingly, it's always busy, but I wasn't 100% sure this one would be. Call me again, though. You sound very plugged in on this issue. Luke is in Northallerton, lovely part of the world. Luke, what would you like to say?
Hello. I've lived in Italy and Spain, as well as different parts of the UK, and just recently been back in the UK for a year and a bit now. And one thing that is so obvious, it's just the way that we look at food, the way we think about food, the way that we act with food. And what I mean by that is the Italians, French, and a lot of our sort of European counterparts, they eat for enjoyment, for passion, and togetherness, whereas here in the UK, it's all about getting as much food down the back of your throat as quickly as possible.
Is it? Are you sure? Are you being fair to your fellow Brit on this one?
I would honestly say, I've been involved in fitness, and I've been an active sports person from the age of 6, and I've always taken a keen interest in food, but I'm a guy who loves a big burger and sort of, some cheap food by all means. But going there, my Italian friends and such, or Spanish friends, I was going into a supermarket, the way they caress the food, they look at the food, and it's almost like an experience going into a supermarket. Whereas over here, interesting story you mentioned about your Greek gentleman who laughed at the food over here. It does. When my English friends went over to it, they would just sit and just eat a real easy plain sandwich and think, this is food. A tomato, wow, this is what a tomato tastes like. Whereas here, it's over-processed, and also there's the major problem of sugar that's in everything that you just sort of mentioned.
In a way that it isn't in other European countries, because they're not consuming the processed food on quite the same scale. Do you have a theory on, I think the American angle is going to become dominant, but it can't be the only reason why Britain has gone down the sugar route and other European countries haven't?
I have to say, interestingly though, the Italians, they have a massive problem with childhood obesity.
Yes.
Arguably one of the worst.
That's fizzy drinks, isn't it?
It's from the drinks.
Yeah.
It's also from the American lifestyle, pushing them burgers and KFCs and McDonald's and other sort of companies purely. Whereas the more of older generation, 25 upwards, seem a bit more knowledgeable about the food. Yeah,
I do.
And they're keeping away from it, whereas the youngsters, they're getting sucked in. So for the next generation coming up, it'll be very interesting to see in the next 10 to 20 years if Italy, Spain, France and such stays the way it is, because certainly the youngsters are getting drawn in by the Americanization of food.
And it's going to have a lot to do with the role that government plays. I'm increasingly persuaded that anybody who ever uses the phrase nanny state is an absolute badger, because who else is going to actually strike some sort of balance between those 99 voices screaming in your ear to eat this and that one voice, or just to drink this, 99 voices screaming in your ear, drink Coke, drink Fanta, drink Tango, drink this, drink that, drink Dr. Pepper, one voice whispering in your ear. You know, water is really refreshing and you know, free. Doesn't happen. So how are you going to balance those scales? I don't know. Incorrigible FCA is characteristically insightful on the issue. One of my favourite tweeters writes, it's more behavioural economics, nudge theory. It doesn't work for everything, especially when it's competing with the epic food marketing and food science industries. We're conditioned into unhealthy food addictions by the endless hunt for capital returns. And again, if you look at the gap between the rich and the poor in this country compared to every other Western European country, particularly if you look at the relationship between wages. Again, you know, I know it seems sometimes that all roads lead to the right-wing media, but our wages haven't gone up. Every other European country over the same period of time has seen wages go up. Why have we been somehow excused from that pleasure? Because a significant swathe of the population was convinced that the reason their wages weren't going up was because of immigration, like there isn't any immigration in Germany or France. Or indeed any other country. So that perhaps explains part of the British condition, is that we obsess more than anybody else does about that particular issue. But when it comes to the endless hunt for capital returns, well, you can see it clearly, can't you? 12:44, Sally's in Hampton. Sally, what would you like to say?
Hello, James.
Hello, Sally.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I totally agree with Incorrigible. I usually do. And
good. Don't big him up too much. You'll get out of control. Go on.
And I think there's a general sort of perspective that's a bit skewed in British eating.
Yes.
And I've lived abroad. I lived in Greece and spent a lot of time in Spain and so on. And their attitude to food is very different. I mean, even if you go into their supermarket, the area that they dedicate to fruit and vegetables is so much bigger than ours. And they don't have like a complete aisle of this kind of pre-prepared foods. They just don't seem to have it. It's not in their psyche.
Ready meals, you mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you're right.
It's just not in their psyche.
But why not? Why isn't it? Because if we've been persuaded by advertising to stock up on you know, Finder's crispy pizzas or frozen lasagna, why haven't other countries been persuaded by the same psychological process that we've been persuaded by? What kept them safe, as it were?
I think there's an awful lot to do with advertising.
Yeah,
and how
I could advertise in France and Spain. I don't think they've got rules necessarily governing food advertising, have they? Or maybe they have.
I don't think so, but I don't see as much.
No, I don't.
And in fact, I never saw an advert for crisps, for example, ever. And yet, sort of that sort of food.
Are you blaming Gary Lineker? Gary Lineker has a lot to answer for on this front, as indeed in so many others.
But there you go. I mean, actually, you do associate somebody who a lot of people admire in society with a really unhealthy food. So that is also an issue.
And having Coca-Cola at the Olympics and all that sort of thing. But of course, that doesn't give it a specifically British perspective. I think between us, though, we're getting close to some sort of consensus on this. Sally, I'm late for the break. It's the only reason I'm doing this. Why Britain, the fattest country in Western Europe? No massive surprise there, but why? I really want more help with the comparison. Like if you move to a foreign country or you've lived in a foreign country and you've suddenly woke, you know, 3 months into your stay or your relocation, you've suddenly gone, crikey, look, it's so different from home. They don't do this, they don't do that, they don't do the other. What is it that we do that explains why we're so fat? 12:51 is the time. Joanna is in Greece. Oh, how convenient. In Pilion. Where's Pilion, Joanna?
It's in central Greece. It's a place you should move to. Well, it's the holiday place of the gods, traditionally.
In the Peloponnese?
No, above the Peloponnese, halfway between Athens and Salonika. You should move there.
Okay. Oh, no, well, I'm not going to move there. I've got bills to pay. But until I do, keep the home fires burning.
I thought you were going to retire to Greece.
I am, but not for a while, Joanna. What prompted you to call in today, apart from the retirement advice?
You were saying about how everything's so different. And
yes.
I've lived here for 4 years, and it is so different. And I can tell you about the oily fish or the,
Well, I'd rather you did it do it the other way round. What is it that we're doing so horribly wrong?
Okay. I think that Britain has not got a cohesive food culture. You know, they don't learn from their mothers and their grandmothers. Therefore, we rely on brands. I used to work in advertising before I ran away. Yes. And so, for example, I just bought 25 kilos of olive oil for €100. Yes. Like, we buy food as a commodity, and then we make what we're going to make with it. We don't buy a brand and have them tell us how to eat. So Greece is the original Mediterranean diet with southern Italy, and it remains the same, really. They don't ask themselves questions, how am I going to lose weight, what am I going to cook? They cook the same thing that they've always
been cooking for hundreds of years.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Where did we take our wrong turn then, do you think? And you're probably too young to answer that, but it's clear that...
I think we got addicted to modern... I remember the freezer culture of my childhood, you know, when everyone, like, modern frozen vegetables were way more convenient. We bought into that. We bought into supermarkets dictating our behaviour, and we've lost our own sense about food.
And why haven't other countries? What is it? I mean, the weather plays a part in it. It's easier to see the relationship between the land and the food, perhaps, if it's growing near. That's why I mentioned the Peloponnese, which is... Of course, the kind of fruit bowl of Greece. It's where, down towards Kalamata, where all the olive groves are. I mean, you'd struggle to grow up in that part of the world without having a healthy relationship with food, wouldn't you?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And it's traditionally feast and famine. Like, there's less days that you're allowed to eat meat in the religious calendar than you are. So, you know, there's just things that are ingrained in people. So they don't have to make it up as they go along. They don't think... So I have quinoa for dinner. Will that make me thinner? You know, it doesn't exist.
No.
Like, my friends will say, oh, you know, I've just been out for a Japanese, and I'm like, we've got broccoli in the shops now. You know, you only eat seasonal veg. No, really, you get excited. It's spinach. You know,
I like that.
You learn to eat a whole different way.
What do you miss most about British food, if anything?
Japanese food.
Do you? Sushi? You miss being... Well, it's on the increase. I saw a few in Athens this summer, but it won't have reached Pilion yet.
Yes, there are. No, but you get used to it. And funnily enough, when you come, you use butter and you buy cheese and you try and, like, keep your diet the same as it was. But it's so mad.
Yes,
and that you end up eating like a Greek.
You evolve into it, and why wouldn't you want to eat like a Greek, frankly? But what took you there? Work, if you don't mind me prying, or are you?
I ran away from advertising. I got a job in the university here.
Oh, fantastic!
In modern languages.
Living the dream.
Yeah.
12:54 is the time, and let's just hope she can hang in there after a fellow countryman have voted to throw the lives of everybody like Joanna into complete turmoil. Brenda is in Winchester. Brenda, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi. I love the show, by the way.
It's all right.
I think it's all to do with taking pride in being able to cook.
Yeah.
If you go back to, let's go to education. We've stripped home economics. Don't need to teach people that that's something you do at home. You go at home, people cook in the oven. That's not cooking. That's reheating food.
Yeah, well, sometimes it's cooking, but I know what you mean.
It's never cooking.
Well, it is occasionally. If I roast the chicken, Brenda, I'm cooking a chicken.
Yeah, you've roasted a chicken as a means to an end, but, most of the...
I'm not having it. I'm on your side completely, but if I stick a chicken in the oven, I'm cooking a chicken.
Yeah, but you've had to get a whole chicken that's not been prepared.
Yeah, I'm not reheating anything, though. I'm cooking a chicken. Anyway, this is a red herring. No, stop it. We've gone down a rabbit hole. Come back. Yeah, thank you. Carry on.
A lot of the time you have chips, oven chips, fish fingers, Kiev... convenience food. Actually, people call that cooking. It's not cooking.
No, that's not cooking.
We educate ourselves about what cooking is.
Cooking is assembling ingredients in the simplest sort of definition, isn't it?
Being able to pick ingredients. I see people looking at the supermarket, and I tap watermelons and shake my avocados, and they think, "What's she doing? Just pick one."
Yeah.
We haven't got the skill.
Where are you from?
I was born in Malawi.
Oh, okay.
And I've lived here for over 20 years, so England and Britain are my home.
If you had to pick the thing that shocks you most about the British attitude to food, what would it be?
Taste.
Gosh.
It's just, it's a McDonald's, so what are you fussed about? And we're fussy about what we eat. I like to eat a whole part of a chicken, whether it's chicken legs or chicken heads or chicken necks.
Heads?
God forbid. Yeah.
Cool.
Why not?
No reason.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Right, hey, look, mate, I'd need a run-up. I just need a run-up to eat a chicken head. I'm not going to knock... Yeah.
But that's the whole point, though. We start with offal. Oh, can't eat that. Oh, can't eat that. And then what does that leave us?
I quite like most offal. I've never eaten a chicken's head, all right? You can sue me if you want, but I love black pudding.
Black pudding's good.
Yeah.
Black pudding's good. But, you know, the whole... I have interesting conversations with my colleagues in my office that I cook every day. And they say, why do you do that for? Because my food tastes better. I teach my kids what a tomato should taste like. You know, if you could just pick a red tomato from the supermarket...
I'm with you. I'm with you. I mean, chicken heads notwithstanding, I'm with you. What do you think? And I mean, I know you've lived here for 20 years, but you may not have a perspective on this, but if you had to take a punt at where we took or why we took a wrong turn... The schools thing is huge, isn't it? Why would
Absolutely.
why would we not... Do we know for sure that people are taught to cook in other countries in school?
I was taught to cook at home.
Yes, exactly.
Now, where the emphasis isn't there at home, where the cooking isn't happening at home, we've said, no, the home environment is where you need to teach it. In the absence of that, because we know it's not happening... and
then you've got to do it in schools.
You've got to do it in schools. You can't just leave it to the public when they're not doing it at home.
How do you...
I remember we used to... I'll tell you, when I was young in Malawi, all the kids learned to light fires and they get little empty cans and make pretend food. And then you graduate from pretend food to using real ingredients. And then you serve that to your parents. And I remember my mum and dad, being served bad eggs for a long, long time and, pretending it was really nice. But you've got to start from somewhere. Do we do that with our kids here? No. If you leave them loose in the kitchen, all you're thinking about is how much mess they're going to create.
Oh, you're very good.
And we miss the whole point.
Yeah, and then if you wanted to make a broader, sweeping generalisation, which obviously you're too clever to do, but I'll do it for you.
I'll never do that.
I'll do it for you. There is this ludicrous sense abroad that there's something sort of middle class or a bit poncy about cooking food.
Exactly.
You
cook every day, fresh ingredients.
Yeah, get you. You think you're better than us. It's like the fetishisation of the ignorant that this country...
Sticking it in the oven. I beg your pardon. I like my food to taste nice, thank you very much. Incidentally, actually, my Facebook post last night was, why is my food so tasty I can't stop eating it?
I really want to ask you how to prepare a chicken head, but Sheila Fogarty's got a radio programme to present. Will you ring me?
I'd love to give you a one-on-one with how to prepare a chicken head.
Well, there's the best offer I'm going to get all day.